All right, everybody. Welcome to the monster panel. Miss Alita, can I ask you to bring your time down?
Okay.
My phone is open.
All right. You said 45? All right.
Oh, we got more people on the panel. All right. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, everybody. Can we get that door closed? Can somebody be kind enough just to swing the door closed for us? We've got a monstrous monster panel today. Okay. We'd like to start it off. My name is Jeff Carroll. I'm a sci-fi writer, filmmaker, creator, and I'm going to be your moderator this morning for our first comic book convention at the African Research Library and Cultural Center. So I am not going to profess to know everybody on this illustrious panel. So I am going to start at my right, the far end. I'll just ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us just who you are. I mean, your title, if it relates to comic books. If you just celebrated Mother's Day tomorrow, that's fine. You're welcome. So please introduce yourselves, and then I'll start the first question.
Okay, first, can you guys hear my voice?
Yeah.
All right, good, because I kind of have like a little, but anyway, my name is Allison. I'm from South Florida, and I'm a graphic designer at a local university. I'm also working at another place, a publishing company. So I've been there since 2015. So I do have a good reservoir of knowledge about the publishing industry and how much there should be a push of diversity going on. So I'll cut that short.
My name is Troy Bernier, and I'm from the Pale Blue Dot. We all know this place. And I'm a scientist, geologist, and I'm also director of the Miami International Science Fiction Company.
Next.
I'm Aaliyah Stanford. I'm the author of Princess Sola in My World. It is a science fiction fantasy novel for children and young adults. And I released the novel in 2015. I have a sequel coming out hopefully by the end of the year, and a coloring book for the younger children coming out next month. Lifelong interest in science fiction, fantasy, and all related fields.
Hi everyone, I'm Mervyn McCoy. I create comics on occasion. Right now I'm working on a story about Nanny of the Maroons. If you don't know who she is, you should ask that young lady right there.
That's Nanny? No, what Nanny was here?
I'm going to say, if you've been to any of the SuperCon shows, I created their mascot.
Oh, right.
Hi, I'm Nikki McCoy. I'm the editor on his comics, and I am a full-time freelance illustrator.
All right. And of course, I'm Jeff Carroll. My benchmark series now is going to be the Harlem Shake. It's a post-apocalyptic series of Black and Latino people in a world mixed between Mad Max and Walking Dead. All right. My first question, as we explore the topic, and I forgot everybody's name already, so let's not go there, but I know what you do. So I know who you are better than what your name is. And this is an interactive panel. So I don't know if you've ever been to comic book panels. They're not academic panels like you see at libraries or on college campuses. If you have a question for any of the panelists or even myself, just raise your hand and I'll stop and we'll answer it. But my first question is dealing with diversity in comics, right? Or science fiction. Let's just deal with the whole thing because the conversation has happened when a certain character in the comic book gets its ethnicity or culture changed in a film. And so for film and comic books, they're sort of connected. You know, sometimes you can read a book and you don't care what the color of the person is. Maybe the culture, you know, or the gender, but certainly not as much as it is when it's film or in comic book. So the visual element is what really sets off this element. Let's talk about it. Let's just throw the broad question out there. What do you think about diversity in comic books and film thus far? And we'll start with you here, and then we'll go down. I said keep your answers as concise as you can. I'm not gonna tell you a time limit, but just be on point.
I think DC's done a really great job of it. I think Marvel needs a little help.
Okay. Why do you say DC? Give me an example by, you like Black Lightning, having the characters on there. What makes you think so?
I would say Black Lightning, specifically as well. I feel like in terms of Asian diversity, I
Okay.
feel like DC's done a really good job with that.
Okay, all right.
I'm not gonna be as controversial. It's a
Not really
complicated, no,
controversial.
here's the thing, it's just that it's a very complicated topic, and I have a lot I could say right now. I kinda wanna hear what everybody has to say, so then I can actually either piggyback or, kind of play devil's advocate, simply because, for example, you said the DC thing and the Marvel thing.
Bring it.
I think both of them kind of fail in that category in general.
Okay.
And just to, so it can go on to you guys really quick. I'll say one thing, and people probably won't like it. Black Panther, good movie. I enjoyed it. One of the few Marvel movies I actually enjoyed.
Wakanda
But
forever.
here's the funniest thing about Black Panther, and here's where the true diversity lies. Diversity doesn't just lie in the character. It lies in who creates a character. And no, not to I love Jack Kirby, a little bit more than Stanley, but I respect both their contributions. At the end of the day, he's still a character that was created. I don't know if you ever read the first appearance of Black Panther. It's laughable.
What do you mean, Jungle Fever?
No,
What was
not
it?
Jungle Action.
Jungle Action.
That's the one with Wesley Snipes.
Right.
No. The thing is, in his first appearance, for the time, yes, it's great, wonderful, blah 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 blah. But it's pretty laughable, and it's because it's created by two guys that really didn't necessarily have their finger on an actual pulse. It was more of a, oh well, it's a good marketing stunt, and it's no knock to them. I respect what they've done, but true diversity in characters and in creating new characters comes from the people creating characters. And I'll explain that later. I don't want to monopolize the panel.
Let me throw something out because they know we always get down on
Yeah.
this. So don't think you're gonna say something
No,
that
it's
they're
not
not
that.
gonna respond
No,
to.
it's not that. I want them to be able to set a piece. I have a second
Let,
part.
let,
to
let me
the-
just respond to you for a simple.
Yeah.
We know as a filmmaker, right? Sometimes we take books and we make them into a film.
Sure.
And that's called an adaptation.
Sure.
So that requires another creator. So when you bring in Ryan Coogler
Sure.
to have an impact on what you already feel is a popular character, but you can't change the name, you can't trash the character, he's already involved in the story, so what do? You bring in somebody that is
That's
of that
right.
creator,
Yeah.
because at the time,
And even Chad Boseman.
right, and I'm gonna hit you with Luke Cage, right? Because I like Luke Cage even more than I like Black Lightning. Now, they have Iron Fist, who has Daughters of the Dust, and it might have done a different job on Asian storyline, but maybe I'm biased because I see it as a New York story that's already very diverse, Hell's Kitchen being very diverse, so I give them credit for that.
Oh, but I didn't say I didn't give them
No,
credit.
no.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it for that. Now, both of y'all have limited the conversation to DC and Marvel. And I said comic books. I said film. I'm included in that because I'm a creator and have Hip Hop Comics and Flicks as my company. So maybe we need to stop only looking at DC and Marvel for our answers for diversity and not ask them to diversify, more so as people to look out and see what's outside and diversify their financial purse.
Right, so just to piggyback off of what you said and pick up where you left off, we have DC, we have Marvel, it was a time period, you're talking about going with a character all the way back to before we were all born.
Yeah.
I'm more excited when I look at the future because we have people out there now and they're now being recognized creating original characters, not the fifth Spider-Man, not the seventh Aquaman, and so forth. And so I think that particularly if we're going to talk about diversity, you're going to look to, and I'm more excited about the characters that are coming out. We have a Nigerian with a superhero character. Excellent work. We have a Haitian superhero that nobody knows about. All of these things are happening. And so to your point, yeah, we're going to expand beyond the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're going to expand beyond DC Comics. This is where we're going to find the future of what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, the heat is turned up now, son.
Indeed. At the same time, I'm having a conversation with my 3-year-old.
Yeah, we know you're a double duty.
So, I must say that there's been a lot of diversity in comic books these days. You know, over the past few years, due to the advances of technology on the internet, you know, these applications and so forth, it makes it easier, it makes it a much less challenge for anyone to come up with an idea, a concept, some drawings, some graphics, you know, instrumentation, equipment, it's all affordable, that we can now produce our own content. And with, you know, the advancement, I don't even want to call it advancement, but if you know how to utilize social media to your advantage, you're now able to spread the word to people that you never knew existed. So that is kind of leveraging the play field so that it provides additional content for the internet, for the consumers. The real challenge is going to be, how can you make a living from it? Okay, that's the real challenge. So, you know, of course you can do it when you're young, when you don't have a whole lot of bills or responsibilities, but if you're able to achieve that hurdle soon enough, then yeah, you're going to be able to monetize and survive and continue to thrive doing it. And that's the real challenge. You know, and that's why it's important to start young.
Now, question, before you get there, let me just ask you this, because you're not necessarily only a comic book person. You are a sci-fi person, because you run the Science Fiction Film Festival. So, and also, I know you as a Trekkie, right? So let's not limit it to just comic books and superheroes, because Star Trek and Star Wars have existed in comic books as well. When we're talking about diversity, sure, we think of the Justice League, sure, we think of the Avengers and X-Men and Fantastic Four, but we also think of the Enterprise. We also think of Kirk. We also think of Sulu. We also think of Scotty, and Uhura,
Yeah,
right? So how does include Star Trek and Star Wars in your answer and
Well,
reword
yeah,
it?
they're also thinking of it too. I gotta take
No
it real
problem.
quick. But they're also thinking of it too, because now, if you don't already know, the animated series is coming back.
Right.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah. I've got to run to the potty.
Okay. No problem. When you come back, just pick up where you left off. 'Cause we're gonna talk. Okay.
No, Star Trek. Star Trek, the animated series is coming back.
Before I let you go, the gentleman had a question. Let me get your question. Was it directed to Troy?
No, I was just gonna state something.
Okay, state it.
I was gonna state that I'm in the process of writing a trilogy, a sci-fi war trilogy,
Oh,
and I want to send it to Pixar.
okay. We will tell you to not
They
hold
don't do
back
that,
and do
yeah.
that.
Don't do that, because for one, they're not supposed to take unsolicited scripts or stories or
Well,
anything. Just
I
go
know
ahead
I
and
can't send it through the direct website.
Or find out how to do it.
yeah, but no, how you do it is you need an agent. You need a literary
Yeah.
agent for them to actually even read it.
That's pretty much his question. He wants to know how he can break into
You need a
it.
Oh.
literary agent.
Okay, well, we have someone here,
Yes, so that's a good question for our
There you go,
professor
right
here.
there.
And I'm sorry, tell me your name again. I'm
My
sorry.
name is Allison.
Allison.
Yeah.
Oh, so I was the only one that did that.
So just a personal question to that, and then the other thing about
Okay.
diversity and social.
Yes.
Right.
So first, of course, you have the idea in mind, you have everything right there ready to go. But of course, there's always that wall of, getting into it, because one is just pyramid of who you know to go up to the top. And at the same time, where you're here in Florida, you have to go to the main source. I mean, of course, you can rely on the internet, but you really have to build up by going to events like this, because you never know who you'll meet. So going on to like a literary agent and building up to that, or entering that area, is I was part of this program called Minorities in Publishing, or Representation Matters. And it's not directly through film, but it's more into publication. But of course, it can dart to any type of direction because of course, when it comes to a film being adapted to a book, it goes both ways.
Right.
But anyway, so this program I was part of, it was no fee, nothing, kind of just sign up, and I was able to be connected to I was connected to the chief editorial of Yen Press. So she was my mentor for quite a while, and then afterwards, I publisher in New York, which is, out of the scope of DC and Marvel, because like I said, there's other publishing companies out there, especially for the Black Voice. There's Lion Force, or Lion Forge. I know
Now it just merged
it's merged
with
with
Oni.
and I heard there was a lot of controversy about
I
that.
can't
They were
wait
like,
we can talk about that here. Let's get into that.
listen, because I follow someone that recently got laid off, and she was trying to find a job because with this going on, they're just kind of rearranging everything. It goes back to whoever is the president of Omni President, who's obviously not a person of color.
But they
do have some.
they
but
may
it's
be
just-
liberal.
They may be really good, but like from what I hear from the arguments, it's on both sides. But if you want more information about that organization, I can give it to you. There's plenty of more information I can give to you because I understand how it is to be at that point where you have no connections. So by being right here, you already established one right here.
I'm already in the process of writing a script for the first movie.
The first
Can I ask how far along you're completed with the first project, is
Well,
that correct?
I'm within the first 15 to 20 minutes of the movie.
Okay.
I always tell people, for me, I am a filmmaker, writer, and I've done books and comics. And I had started by being a filmmaker. And I ended up having about 7 screenplays on my shelf. And they were beautiful ideas. I could never get any money from them because I'm in pitch, in delays, pitching it and over and over. So I started writing them into books. And what I like about either a book or a comic book is that now your idea is out there. You can own it. Nobody can necessarily steal it, but they steal from each other as well, So that's not a foreign thing, but at least you can make something from it, and it's not like it's going to go nowhere, So I always say get it out there commercially. Now, before we go to the next question, I know I said something back to you all, Troy, of course. But is there any comments that you would like to say now that we've heard everybody's answer? Or did you give your answer to the question?
No, she needs to give her answer.
Yeah, let me hear it. Because you just
Yeah, she
answered.
was,
The question is the
gentleman.
basic question. What do you think of diversity so far, comic book, sci-fi, or in this whole scenario? What do you think so far?
It's growing. Of course, in some certain areas, it might not be like say from Marvel or DC because they already have their thing. It's our turn right now. Exactly. Because why do we have to rely on these big name studios to voice out who we are?
You go, girl.
I mean, it's
It
true.
was in 1990 that Brother Man sold $1 million worth of his comic book. So let's not deny that. I'll give you another element to answer, and I want to hear you.
Well, I have a rebuttal for the whole thing.
Okay, let's hear that. But, if you want to go first, you can go first, or I'll make my comment.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to respond to something Troy said, but it's important for all of us because Troy hasn't been on my Facebook page in a while, and I have recently left my job to be full-time writer. And it's been very trying to find the economics. Thank you. I have joined the Starting Artist Group, right? And it's really hard when you have a family and a son about to go to college next year. So, anyway, I'll say because of Wakanda Forever, right? The element of economic stability and potential has always been a mystery for Black writers and writers of color, especially when we represent 13%, and if you'll say Latino community, maybe we'll bump that up to 30% of the United States population. We always feel that we can't make money off our art, right? And I do believe with the success of Luke Cage crashing Netflix, which is not necessarily the internet, but Netflix at the time was before Hulu was anything, before anybody was anything. Luke Cage crashed it, being authentically tiara removing Black, no bracelets, and no jungle talk, right? He did it with a hip hop soundtrack. Then we had Black Panther destroy things, and he wasn't only Black, he was African, right? And so that to me was blacker, right? Blacker and more African than DC or any of the other brands were willing to even go. At the time, I was pitching stuff as Black Panther with ancestral realms and all of those different elements, and Black people were telling me that's too Black. And what we found out was the world was waiting for too Black. And guess what? some of these stories that I seen, even coming out of Lion Forge, were trying to be multicultural, trying to lay off of that blackness, trying to not be so black enough. And that's why I think not just Lion Forge, but maybe other companies haven't enjoyed the success that Luke Cage on the Netflix and Black Panther in the film enjoyed. So that's how that's my answer to it all. Except that, I'm not gonna be so black, but black, a lot of people are scared. What you gonna do with black sci-fi? You gonna kill white people? And they used to think, white people used to come up to my table and say, "Can I read this?" I'm like, "What makes you think you can't read this book?" Black people was like, that's revolutionary. What?
That's right.
I love Godzilla. I love Godzilla. Godzilla killed more Asians than anybody, but I enjoy it. I love Kung Fu movies. They ain't going to Africa and beating up nobody. Anyway, let me stop. Murph, please go ahead with yourself, and then you can comment.
This is actually like more of a, it's not a rebuttal to what you're saying, but it's kind of a lateral, I'm going to move laterally.
Yes.
What's fascinating when you say multiculturalism, that's a word that's been hijacked by many people that use it in a very negative sense or a very one-sided sense. Because if you start going back, and this is all out of the 90 research I've been doing, if you start going back, the continent of Africa itself is as multicultural as you get.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about colonized Africa, I'm talking about Africa, Bantu tribe. Actually, no, let's even go all the way down. There's a tribe that they said probably went all the way over to China way back in the day.
Yes.
And they went right back. I don't know how, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The point is, there's a reason why every single one of us in here that may be of African descent or whatever looks absolutely different. Because we're extremely multicultural on that continent. And I think by allowing that term to be used as a pejorative, but whether it's saying, well, there's too many, why are you mixing it up with other races? I think we end up putting ourselves in a box because as people, as black people or people of color, whatever you want to call yourself, we are so different. Because I'm from Jamaica originally, right?
No. I thought you learned that accent on the internet.
I might have, but I learned it from Bushmaster. But,
That was horrible.
yeah, right, it's really bad. But a perfect example of that is when you said, no, he was a great character. But a perfect example of that is no, I did like him. I didn't expect that. I did not expect. You like what we're talking about Bushmaster? I did not expect that.
Season 2, Luke
I
Cage.
did, the accent is awful, but he was actually a three-dimensional character.
Right.
But long story short, you look at a place like that, and you go from the hills to the valleys, and it varies because of the different tribes they brought. You have the Coromantee tribes. My lineage comes from Sierra Leone, so you had Limba tribe. My people were probably Limba tribe. As opposed to say Nani or the Maroons and most of the Maroons that were Coromantee or Ashanti or Kansai.
Oh, Calvin.
How do you know it's Sierra Leone?
My family did a family tree thing when we had our last reunion. That's my father's side because I don't know what my mother. My mother, she definitely come from a warrior tribe.
Right before Mother's Day.
Let me roll into a question that you bring up.
We're gonna go back to Troy first. His comment.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, anybody want to, did you have a comment?
I apologize.
Yeah, finish.
Well, yeah, if folks don't already know that CBS is really pushing, and trying to market Star Trek because, it is a very popular brand and it used to make a lot of money. Well, it has a huge
Discovery is the best.
It has a huge fan base.
Yes.
And that's my point. I'm not going to talk about how much money it makes because it actually didn't make a whole lot of money. But, so as a result of that, some of their films, some of their new products, as you know, there's a Picard series, there's the Discovery series, there are other series that are coming. And one of them,
Star Wars
That's debatable. He'll
and
debate you.
and there's Star Trek the animated series. So folks who don't know, there's a 4th season, which is the animated series.
Right.
And it takes Star Trek on levels that you could not see in the original series because it's animated. You don't need the prompts, right? So in the context of diversity, it's not just about having different aliens and things like that. It's going to be people of color, people of different cultural backgrounds and heritage that are
We
going
had
to
the
be in
Captain
contribution.
Discovery when it started,
Yeah, but I don't think you would take, I don't understand why you would take an absolutely amazing character
I know,
and kill him
Okay,
in the
now
first
you're
20
I
minutes.
didn't
now you're going to spoil it. Don't spoil it.
You know, it was so bad they brought her back from the dead.
Right.
You know,
No
And
alternative.
we'll go into the Star Wars thing real soon because Disney's about to give us something that is now finally possible.
Okay.
Wow.
But that's another issue.
All right,
Actually,
actually, I have a question for the panel in terms of diversity. I'm a teacher. I teach.
So quiet people, you'll get the answer.
At a school for children with special needs, and one of the tools that I use in my classroom is comic books.
They
I
all
use comic books to teach diversity in the classroom, but it's usually not mainstream comics. So I tend to agree with you where mainstream representation isn't where it should be.
Right.
And I find myself struggling with a lot of my students to point out where we ourselves, because a lot of the writers are of those nations or of those cultures, and yet even within themselves, they tend to stereotype. And that's one of the biggest concerns I have when I'm teaching them. How do I point out these stereotypes and have them move away from it, even for young black students, young Latino students, Jewish students? It's one of the really big things, and I want to know where you guys stand on moving away from stereotyping, even ourselves stereotyping ourselves when we write these.
Nicole,
present
Alina
these
first.
songs.
Yeah. What I would say to that, first of all, you have a room full of kids. What age are you teaching?
I teach high school, everything from 8th grade up to 12th grade.
Even better, you have a room full of opportunities. The way to teach diversity is to make it inclusive. Bring them in as creators and with their ideas. And you're going to have your diversity day, and you're going to discuss that. You're going to have them to do their presentations from their perspective. You got your diversity, you got your discussion right there. That's how you open it up. That's a good way, I think. That's what I do when I go in the classroom with kids. I always do an interactive exercise to have them put input, not just my input, telling them this, and that, their input. That's how I do it.
One of the things I try to do is I try to teach them about each culture before we get into the graphic or before we even get into a book. The history of everything that's written is very important to what's being written. The history and background of the person that's writing is very important to what's being put on the paper. So we always learn about the authors and their background before we even get to the writing, where they come from. So the one thing that I always try to teach them is that this is black and white stereotype from somebody's perspective. You gotta build your own perspective on what you're reading. And don't build into it, don't feed into it or grow into it. Grow your own path.
Right, which is why I'm excited about original content from up-and-coming content creators. I think that's really good.
Nicole or anybody else would like to add on to the answer, or I can go to the question?
Question.
No, Nicole's going to say.
I would just I guess like you said, introducing them to different cultures. I don't know if you've included manga or manhwa in the because I think that that's coming from a super personal place, and it's funny because when we started out, usually when you say comics, you think of Western comics, you think of DC and Marvel, but the comic industry in Asia has been so overwhelmingly popular. They're printing on newsprint, so it's easily affordable for everyone. They're printing it a smaller size, pocket manga. It's and I think that the best thing about it is that it's not specifically for children. I think that, and I know that Mervyn can elaborate on this, but comics have kind of become seen as sort of a kid's thing in the West. It's oh, the Sunday funnies, ha ha ha. Whereas manga, it's for all types of ages. You have shonen, for young boys. You have shoujo for young girls. You have seinen, which is more adult. And I think that they cover different facets too. It's not just superheroes. It's there's mangas about cooking and volleyball and all sorts of just super
king
random things.
tomorrow.
That's coming from somewhere else. That's not me. That might be my inner voice. You finished?
Yeah, no, it's fine. But pretty much that, and
Okay. I want to 1 2 1 2. I want to try to piggyback on what I got from what Mervyn was saying in terms of going probably where diversity is. We just talked about the importance of, not the importance of how they're doing with diversity, right? And I've actually asked people for examples, so I'm going to be a little bit more, I'm going to be a little bit more specific, and maybe we can run through it real quick. Give us an example, right? You were talking a little bit about manga and some of the characters there, and it's so funny, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about how when I was in the comics, people thought comics were short for comedy, that everything was supposed to laugh. And it also started like that. So it's not a bad perception for people to think that comics are comedy or funny or for kids. They just had a royal baby named Archie, right? Whoa, that's loud. We might be able to sit this in the middle. We had the royal baby named Archie, and one of the comic books when I was younger was Archie, you know? And so I think that's what makes people in the West see it. But when I went to Japan, the regular bookstores, there was all types of subjects in there. There was adult comics, everything. I just threw mine away because I didn't want my son to see them, but it was crazy. So my question is definitely, it wasn't something that I expected, right? But my question is, can you give us an example of maybe a manga story or another story where you think they got it right, or the most right, or the best so far? I'm gonna go down this way, and the mic is real loud, so you gotta hold it far away. If you don't want to do it, you can pass it down, and then as you think of one, let me give more.
I turned the volume down.
You did?
Cool, Friday.
Testing.
All right, go ahead. You have something, Nicole?
Okay.
If you don't, you can pass it because Troy's ready.
Well, we were talking about diversity, and specifically, I mean, I can't really speak necessarily for the story because it's about magical girls, but I guess it's kind of relevant because it's about female empowerment. But with Sailor Moon, with the introduction of the Outer Scouts, there was specifically one Sailor Scout named Sailor Saturn that I flipped my lid over as a kid because she actually looked like me, which was really rare for comic characters at that time because a lot of times they were just anthropomorphic or of a certain race that wasn't your race. So it was hard to relate. So for me, that was definitely a got this right, and it was, I mean, the creator is a woman and is of Asian ethnicity, so I guess I was able to really relate and feel that as a result.
This is actually a really bad example because it's not related to me in any way, but I was very happy for the people who it represented. And it was Akira. I don't know if you ever read the manga, but it's 3,000 pages of actual manga drawings that look like Japanese people. And it's actually, if you've never read it, and not the anime, if you've never read Akira, you should. Whatever your likes, it's one of the most brilliant pieces about
Now pause for a second. You just was talking about how diverse African people are.
Yeah.
Now, I've been to Asia.
well, no, Japan.
I've been to Japan and I've been to China, and there's a variety of them as well. And I don't always.
But the reasons are a little different than say.
I understand, but when
gets
you're
political.
talking about the images, one of the biggest images that they love to portray in manga is big eyes, which is a
Which
distortion.
were absent in Akira.
Right, and that's what I'm saying in manga, and a certain skin complexion that varies because they have a skin complexion that is probably a stereotype.
Yeah, no, there's well, I don't want to say.
So I don't know. So now,
Well,
now that's why I ask you. I know it was present in my favorite, which was Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
But were there different complexions and different eye shapes? It's a question because.
Oh, you mean from the manga?
Yes,
yeah,
from the one you're talking
it varied, but there were, I guess the equivalent would be, they'd be more like the typical, the Tokyo look. I don't know if I'm using the right term.
Right.
But they were less atypical, you know, if you
They
ever...
vary.
Yeah, exactly, they
That's
vary.
all I was asking.
The main character specifically, look at Tetsuo compared to Kaneda. Tetsuo had this giant forehead, he had a receding hairline, he was like, what, 12? I don't know. You know, and Kaneda looked more like a, yeah, stress. You know, Kaneda looked different, the rest of the gang looked different. It was just a very fascinating look at what you can do when you're trying to, I guess, empower, you know, your fellow whatever people of whatever nationality, because by the end of the book, even the general theme speaks to why they, you know, Otomo drew the book or Otomo made the film. Well, either way, Katsuro Otomo, why he chose to go the route he did. Same thing with Miyazaki to a lesser extent. I still appreciate what he does with his work, but he doesn't go as extreme as, say, I don't know, like Clown. Sorry.
Okay. Next.
Yeah, very briefly, I would just say that with regard to the manga in particular, they have, you know, new styles coming out, like you said, but I love that classic style manga. From an artwork perspective, it is just so beautiful
Because
to
you're
me.
an artist as well.
And yeah, and so that I really love it. That's all I had to say.
So what is your favorite? But you, good example of the diversity. So Troy, yours.
Yes, I watch about anywhere between, let's say, 400 to 500 movies a year because of the festival. And, you know, from all over the planet. We get films from everywhere. We had our first Afrofuturism session this past year where even the filmmakers from Kenya came.
All right.
It was fantastic. It was kind of sad, not a whole lot of us showed up for it, but that's another conversation.
Stick in my heart.
The most diverse show on television today has already gone down as the best science fiction series of all time, and that is The Expanse. If you don't know this, you're really missing out, because they're already looking at season 4 now. Everybody is in this film.
I don't think anybody complained about that either. Women, black.
Yeah, no one's complaining about it. Yeah,
Nah,
no one's complaining about this series.
Not
Sci-fi, but they canceled it, and there's such a large fan base that people begged the guy Bezos from Amazon, and he said, "What? They canceled it? No, I like the show. We're going to put it on Amazon Prime." And they got a new season, season 4 on Amazon Prime. I don't think that's ever happened before.
And it started as Leviathan Wicks. It was a book series.
Yes, based on a book series.
You know, so just so you know, because that's going to relate to my answer. But go ahead.
But yeah, when I say everybody's in there, you know, they've got, and it's not just, you know, you've got the janitor, the space janitor, and it's a black person or somebody from Brooklyn or something like that.
Oh, you hating on
we
Star
have
Wars.
people.
Y'all saw that Finn, right?
We have people. The characters that are in The Expanse are characters of power. It's not a comedy. It has some comedy elements into it. That it's kind of amusing, but it's a very serious, hard sci-fi based on real science. It's basically our grandchildren's future.
Right.
That's what it's based on.
All right, let's hear Allison.
And yes, it's my favorite show right now. And yes, it's based on my original movie called Planeta Desconocido.
Oh, that's right. They did jack your idea. We just talked about that.
So what's this topic going off of
Your
diversity and
a good example.
in anime and manga?
No, that was their answer.
Oh,
it was just a good answer, so we thought about it. Yeah, we went on. He took it away. He took it to the Expanse. But the whole thing is, we talked about what they're getting, what diversity is, the impact of it, and then we started talking. Let's get an example of it. So now we're just giving good examples because we're coming close to the last question. So, what would be a good example of diversity in comic books, film, you name it, whatever. It could be a board game.
Okay. I'm just gonna go off with the anime and manga.
Tabletop.
I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this show called, hopefully I can pronounce it correctly, Michiko and Hatchin. No? Yes, exactly. Because when I first found about that, I was very surprised to see it was, created or produced in Japan, where you would see not much, people of color over there, but still to see that these creators would go that far to research about the culture, because I think it's mostly based in Brazil from where it is. So that took me away. And so when I saw this range of characters, their designs, their skin tones, I'm like, this is where it's at. I mean, I was really surprised at seeing that. So I believe for an anime aspect, that's where I saw like a pretty good example of that, especially when it comes to a show that focuses on women. So that's
All right. I'm going to start talking before I get to mine. Go ahead.
She wants to say her favorite.
Oh,
What's your favorite
the
show?
youngest monster panel panelist.
What's your favorite show? Don't be shy. You're telling me 20 times what you want. No? What's your favorite show? What's the name of your favorite show?
Don't look, everybody don't look around.
All right.
Look away,
No?
everyone.
What is it? What's the name of the show? What's the name of the character? Running out of time. Okay, well, think about it and we'll come back to it, okay?
LOLs.
The LOLs.
LOL dolls.
Yes. Oh. So, we never get enough time on this panel. And the reason why I do this panel is because this is a very important topic for the industry. Okay, the industry is actually at war with themselves, and yet we rarely get a chance to talk about this. And it's really a shame because we're in the diverse capital of America. I call South Florida Wakanda Light. I'm a migrant, and so I know what it's like to be the only black kid on your baseball team, right? So I lived in America. And when I come down here and I see black superintendent, black police chiefs, black mayors, Latino this, Latino that, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. For us not to have this as our conversation on a regular is really sad. But the Monster Panel is here to really have it. I'm going to answer my question, and then I want to put this out to you because we have less than 5 minutes left. So we're just going to run through it in a closing comment. You answer the question, and you keep it moving, and I want to thank you all for being real good guests. So the closing comment is, what do you look forward to in the world of comic books and movies, board games, whatever, in the subject of diversity? Okay? So start thinking of your answer. My answer to the question, of a good example, is of course I would love for my tribe to be on Paramount. So I would say Luke Cage, because I'm of hip-hop element, and culture to me is very important. So just putting black people, Latino people, Asian people, a gay person, straight person, that's token diversity. Real diversity comes through cultural behavior, cultural thinking. So for the fact that Luke Cage thought like a person from Harlem, thought like a black person, would sit down and have some collard greens and some cornbread, was what I liked about it. Now, what I also like is what Myrn built on was a start, was with Black Panther. And Wakanda being a diverse African nation, they had fashion from everywhere. They had food. They had people from as many places, because there's over 60, 70 countries in Africa alone, and there's more than that in terms of cultural tribes. So it's really impossible to just represent that. But to start it, to give you an idea, I also like the fact that they had an ancestral plane. And for me, the diversity outside of religious thinking is the most important for me. And so when we talk about what Thanos represented, in terms of killing people, I wanted to see how Wakanda handled that, because they didn't see death as depressing as us Abrahamic religious people think. And for me, I would have liked to see that. But it was a start. Now, what do you look forward to? Knock it out. Whoever wants to go, your answer, real quick. And then after they go, I think we have time with people.
Real quick, it's just playing on that. Was at a talk with the former, what was his name? Ambassador to Singapore. Anyway, one of the most important things he said is, post, colonization, all that stuff, the way America keeps, I don't want to say it's boot on the world's neck, but whatever, boot on the world's neck is by this thing called soft power. And soft power technically is your entertainment, right? Instead of putting guns to people's heads, you put ideas, as opposed to what the British did, right? So my point being, going back to the first thing I said about Marvel and DC and all that stuff, they're not important. No, I'm not going all into that. But the point is, pay attention to the things that you revere, the things that you take in. Yes, I'm looking forward to a lot of things, but that's irrelevant. I want you guys to look forward to new, different things, just like everybody on the panel said. These bigger companies, they do matter in that they do drive conversation. So you have to find ways in which to subvert that conversation, to steer it towards these new, different and empowering brands.
And that is a very important point to remember. Media and images are powerful, very powerful. And those in power use them to their advantage. Never forget that. Secondly, I would like to say for myself what I most look forward to.
Yes.
I came in, I was setting up, a third grader came up to me with his comic book. And we talked about, what he wants to be in the future, what he wants to write about. I'm so looking forward to that. That was like the really, really inspired me today. So that's what I look forward to.
With the respect for time, just keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, no.
And put your money where your thoughts are, because they do.
Okay.
And so for my close notes, for everyone here, everyone who's with the panel and also for the audience, it starts with you. If you want to see the change, if you have a comic book idea, make it. That's what I did. Find events, showcase your work, because nothing else is going to stop you. Really, the only person is you. So that's my closing statement. Just go out there and show the world what you have.
Well, thank you, Allison. Nicole, I think she's got something now, so we're going to hear from Nicole. And then I have something.
I'm looking forward to Jordan Peele's next movie.
Ooh, Mom! Is that Mom? Is that Mom? Mom? Or it's not yours, but it's not Mom.
It's in
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. I want to see that too. What I'm looking forward to is whenever it comes, the next Avatar with the blue people. James Cameron, because he's holding the title and it's socially relevant outside of my own work. But I would like to invite y'all to my Florida LitCon. That's coming up on June 15th. And I think I saw a question. Anybody have a question? If not, or comment. If not, I want to thank you all. You all have been a really good audience. You got one?
Yeah, about what you said about people being afraid about how superheroes are too black and everything. They only say that because they're afraid of the outcome.
Of course. Of course.
Afraid.
I mean, now you sound like my rap group, Public Enemy. You know what I'm saying? Fear of a Black Planet really wasn't just the Black Planet, but it was the possibility of the planet having a black element to it. Our thoughts. They're scared of what we have up here. And again,
it's not all about targeting white people. It's not.
No.
In fact, that's going too far. If you're doing that.
Well, again, this country has a history. That's why we have this library here. If this country would teach what we've all been talking about here on this panel, we actually wouldn't need this library because it would be in every library. I don't understand, but I value this library because, again, I'm from America and I've seen how they use thoughts and ideas to oppress us. I do a presentation on it.
They still do.
Yep. So thank you all. Oh, we're getting comments now. Let's go overtime.
I just want to thank everybody. I'm Dr. LaRoche here at the library.
Yes.
Your thoughts about Thanos and the whole idea around death and stuff. Culturally, that's very interesting because, when you think about the Mexicans, the Day of the Dead, and you think about the reverence for our ancestors, I'm glad that you pointed that out, and I would really like to talk more about that, and just in terms of how we do view death as an extension of our life. And
Hey,
thank you so much for pointing that out.
no problem. I mean, we all get deep on different subjects, so thank you very much for that. But yeah, that was my problem, and spoiler alert. But in game. Okay. No, I'm just gonna say this. It's a big not gonna say anything about it. I'm just gonna say, that is a big theme of what we're doing. Okay, I'm not gonna do it in game. Okay, I'm off in game. I will say this. No, I'm gonna say. I'll say this. Even with Batman, right? One of the things that people like to say separate adult comic books from children comic books is death, right? Now, aside from Marvel, aside from DC, what I like about African and Asian science fiction is that they don't deal with it the same way. I make horror movies. Horror movies in the Western world, you say ghost, people run. You say dead, they think bad. In African cultures, throughout the diaspora, you say dead, we say ancestor. Dead can be as good and bad as alive. And for certain elements, that has to change if we are to diversify. We cannot only think of certain people, and even beyond, because the comic books are already out on Thanos. And I'll just speak on Thanos and not the movie, right? His whole presence was in the comic books pleasing Lady Death. In Egyptian culture, we have a god of death. He is not bad. And I'm going to leave it with that. But I see the Egyptian pictures on the wall, and it just made me think of it. So let's open up that conversation. I think we're over time. I don't know if anybody's going to tell me.
5 minutes over time.
Troy, knock it out. I'm sorry. No spoiler.
So what was the next question?
No, that was it. Let's take a picture.
Who hasn't seen the Avengers yet? No one's seen the Avengers?
What?